Mrs. McMillan, along with Mr. Evans, is a phenomenal theater director. We've enjoyed many plays that she has directed, but you may not have seen her perform herself. Ms. McMillan has worked hard to prepare this chapel, just as she will work hard with all of the student chapel speakers this year to make sure they do their very best when they get up on this stage. It's in her DNA. Let us give our respectful attention and our warm welcome to Ms. McMillan.
Before we begin, I'd like to say a few thank yous. I'd like to thank my pal, Ms. Schomers, for helping me out with this. I would like to thank the weather for being humid so that my hair could be frizzy. Hopefully I will start to sweat, fingers crossed. And I'd also like to thank my 6-year-old daughter, Piper. She's not here today, but she knew I was speaking, and so she has been really encouraging all week. She made me this card, and on this card there are hearts, and good luck, mommy, and I love you, and a 4-leaf clover, which really has 3 leaves, but I knew what she meant. And I'm gonna put this right here. And she also wanted to give me some public speaking tips, like mother, like daughter, I guess. And so she said to me, here was her first tip. She said to me, if you're nervous, imagine the audience in their underwear, and you won't be nervous. Now, she's too young, bless her heart, to understand how very creepy. But the best advice she gave me was, mommy, if you get nervous, imagine that everyone in the audience is a dolphin. And that made perfect sense to me. So here we go. I have a confession to make. I'm not an intellectual.
No,
I'm sorry, Chelsea. No, please, could you just sit down? No. Please, just give me a chance. Can you give me a...
just this once.
Give me a chance? I'm sorry.
Just this once. Just last time.
Fine. Thanks. I appreciate that. Sorry. I'm sorry. Now, some of you may be thinking...
Wait a minute. What? Not an intellectual? I came to Blair looking to benefit from the masterful teaching. I'm going to tell Mr. Bacon how you aggressively stalked me to be in your play, just so I can get it.
That's a true story, by the way. Andrew, just please, can you give me a chance to explain? Thank you. Appreciate it. So you may be thinking, what's an intellectual, which clearly I'm not, because I can't pronounce the word, or what a dork, who cares, or even more likely. I hear you. No, Tyler, wake up, I hear you. Come on, I'm trying to get the thing up here. Jeez. Thank you. For those of you who are still with me, allow me to explain. When Miss Crowner first asked me to speak at chapel, the first thought I had after, I have to pee, because the thought of doing this really made me nervous, was what do I have to say that the students, my colleagues, my bosses, my family, hi Mom, yes, your family still comes to see you do things like speak in public, even when you're 29 years old. Why are you laughing? I understand why you're laughing. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is what do I have to say that essentially everybody I care about would want to listen to? I mean, I know I said I'm not an intellectual, but I'm certainly no dummy. I am passionate in the material I present to my students. And even though the material changes from year to year, the format is typically the same. And let's be honest, in the classroom, you're basically my captive audience. In the classroom, you need me as much as I need you. If not just a little bit more. However, to stand up here in front of those I need to teach, those whom I respect and whom I hope respect me, and say something about myself that's worth listening to, well, the very thought is enough to shake the most confident person to her core. What to say? A student with whom I'm close and I had a conversation about this very question. She said to me, Ms. McMillan, you have to let people know who you are. Those of us who know you, we really know you. But the students who don't know you at all. So, let me get this straight. The students who know me. But the students who don't know me, don't know me. Okay, maybe not a shining example of that student's deductive reasoning ability, but I knew what she was saying. So, who am I? What am I? I began to make a list. I thought to myself, I've always been athletic. Maybe I can tell them some inspiring or endearing story about an athletic accomplishment of mine. Here's the story that came to mind. When I was in 6th grade, I lived on Long Island. I went to a summer camp called Camp Alvernia, and at the end of the summer, there was a huge tennis tournament. And I decided to play. Despite a lack of experience, despite poor technique, and against all odds, I hung in there, and I came in 2nd place, winning a silver medal. It was the last day of camp, and I rushed home, and I told my parents that I came in 2nd place in the camp tennis tournament. My parents, who had played tennis with me on several occasions and knew what my capabilities or lack thereof were, never sent me back to Camp Alvernia. When they found out I came in 2nd in the camp-wide tennis tournament, they deduced that they must have been mistaken about the kind of camp Camp Alvernia was, and that maybe the needs of the other campers were much more significant than my own. Okay, what else? I've always been a go-getter. I've never been afraid to take a chance or try something new. It's a good one, right? Here's the story that came to mind. During my junior year at Council Rock High School in Newtown, Pennsylvania, I had a social studies, that's what we called it in public school, a social studies teacher whom I really liked, Mr. Schweitzer. Mr. Schweitzer was the administrator at our school of a nationwide program called Presidential Classroom that brought high-achieving students to Washington, D.C. for a week. While the program itself had a set of criteria that every applicant had to meet, because our school, my high school, was so large, 2,500 students in 10th through 12th grade, one first had to meet the criteria and then take a test and place in the top whatever percentage, and even to be allowed to apply. So on the day of the test, I decided to take it. Most of my friends were taking it. I met the criteria, so I thought to myself, why not? Take a chance. What do you have to lose? After the test, Mr. Schweitzer, my favorite Mr. Schweitzer, called me up to his desk. Mickey, he said, during the test, I thought I saw you looking at your neighbor's paper. What? Mr. Schweitzer thought I cheated? I was devastated, mortified. No, was all I could stammer. Well, we'll see when the tests are corrected. I walked out of the classroom in a daze. Mr. Schweitzer thought I cheated. What if he called my parents? And I hadn't cheated, I really hadn't. But how was I going to explain the record-setting score I was going to get on that test? I didn't eat or sleep for 3 days. Finally, Mr. Schweitzer called me back into his classroom, all smiles. The Mr. Schweitzer I knew and loved. Mickey, he said, so sorry about the confusion. I know you didn't cheat. In that instance, I was so relieved. And in the next, I was mentally packing my bags for a week in our nation's capital. I relinquished my reverie momentarily. That's great, I said. How did you realize? Mr. Schweitzer, kind, learned, nurturing Mr. Schweitzer, looked me kindly, learnedly, nurturingly in the eyes and said, you got the lowest score, so there's no way you could have cheated. Oh, I began to notice a pattern. In attempting to divulge who or what I was most often, at least in these particular circumstances, discovering who or what I was not. What an interesting concept. We're so programmed to be the best whatever we can be or do the best we can do, that it's rare that we stop to think about the opposite. In fact, dwelling on what we can't do or be is something most of us in this community would discourage. Bear with me though, there's a point here. Throughout our lives, who or what determines what we are not, or what we are? At any given time, it is both external and internal influences, although it would be accurate to say, when we are very young and have yet to become very self-aware, it's most likely other people, parents, teachers, other authority figures, who evaluate what we are or are not. The first time I can recall someone defining what I was not, I was in the 4th grade at Benjamin Franklin Elementary School in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. Although I don't remember why I was invited to leave the cafeteria. And as the lunch aide, Mrs. Dates, was walking me out into the hallway, she called to someone at the top of her voice, all the way down the hallway, "She's nothing like her sister." Mrs. Dates did not intend her comment to be a compliment. She was right. While my sister's report card most often read, "Jennifer is a pleasure to have in class," mine read, "Mickey is an excellent reader with an advanced vocabulary. Besides that, she can't sit still, she never stops talking, and as of 4 p.m. today, the class's pet hamster has yet to be returned to its cage. Please check Mickey's book bag when she gets home." My family tried to accept me for the independent spirit I was, even though I tended to march to the beat of my own drummer, apparently a beat that only I heard. But in the moment of Mrs. Dates' comment that begged nuance, sensitivity, and tact, I realized for the first time that I was not, at least in the eyes of Mrs. Dates, a good girl. But by the way, it could be at that very moment that I subconsciously decided to become a teacher, so that there would be one more in the world that would never say anything like that in front of a kid. You're welcome. So let me answer the question that's on everyone's mind. No, I am not trying to lose my job by illustrating all the times throughout my life in which I failed to succeed. As a matter of fact, that I'm standing here speaking to you today is a success story in and of itself. When I was a junior at Lafayette College, go Pards, my roommate in a suite that was supposed to be a triple, but we hoped would be a double, was a junior transfer student. Her name was Janet Bowers. She was delightful, and she wanted to know, did we want to go watch her brother play football at her high school? It was only about 45 minutes away. When we arrived at Blair Academy, the beauty of the campus and the simultaneous enthusiasm and sophistication of the students really struck me. It actually reminded me a lot of Lafayette. And this is, by the way, this is a true story. I'm not just trying to make it all better. We watched Janet's brother Jordy play football. I don't remember who Blair played or who won. But even though I was 20 years old, and I didn't know yet consciously that I wanted to become a teacher, I never forgot Blair. 7 years later, after I had become a teacher, and I realized that my place was at a boarding school, I set my sights on Blair Academy. My first interview was in New York City, and I met with Mr. Bacon and Mrs. Stone, and it all went very well, I thought, and those meetings reinforced in my mind that Blair was the place for me. Alas, the English teacher for whom they were looking also needed to coach varsity football and wrestling. I could have done that. By the way, I'm pretty sure Dan Hoff took my job. I've forgiven him. And where's Dan Hoff now? Anyway, I wasn't going to give up. 3 years after that, another English vacancy, another interview, and here I am. And I was right. But I digress. What I want to say is when I looked back over instances in my life thus far from the standpoint of not doing or not being, I realized what a valuable tool it is in illuminating truly and clearly who or what I am, as well as who the people surrounding me at any given time are, what their capabilities are, and how they differ from mine. And that's really a good thing. As for the the story of my anticlimactic tennis victory, I may have realized I wasn't a very good tennis player, but I also discovered that I was willing to take a chance, give it my all, and follow through to the end. In the instance of my test-taking turmoil, well, in some situations it can be an attribute to take a chance. This time, it could have gotten me in a lot of trouble. In my inability to recognize the seriousness and importance of the situation practically and realistically, as a matter of fact, when I thought about it, almost all my friends who were taking the test had spent a significant amount of time preparing for it. I pretty much ensured my own failure. And what if I hadn't sucked at social studies? Someone who I really admired and cared about would have had a perception of me that was always tinged with doubt concerning my integrity. And I would have been grounded for a really, really long time. Finally, well, at the time of Mrs. Dates' observation, not being like my sister meant, to me, not being good. As my sister and I have grown into adulthood, it's the very traits that have made us so unalike that have brought us together. When I know I can't be patient, which is often, and when I fear, I won't be diplomatic, my sister Jen is the first person I call for advice and guidance. When Jen's lacking motivation or feels she's feigning fortitude, she knows I'm just the right person to cheer her on and to make fun of her. So back to our original topic. What is an intellectual? Generically, the term describes one with the desire and ability to pursue and understand at an advanced level academic matters. To a certain extent, that describes everybody in this room. When I was 27 years old and in my second summer of graduate school, it described everybody who knew everything that I did not. And seemingly that was everybody. Excited to be spending my summer in the idyllic Green Mountains of Vermont, I fortuitously found my way into an animated, witty, and fun-loving group of fellow students, all of whom I'm still friends with. To me, it was serendipitous that we had found our way to this remote mountain campus, all fueled by the same passion, literature. After classes and homework, and dinner and homework, and wiffle ball and homework, there was always a group of us who congregated on some central dorm on the front porch on campus in the Adirondack chairs and did what English teachers, which most of us were, do best: talk. After a long day steeped happily in the pursuit of literature, I thought surely the conversation would turn to sports or music or even the upcoming Saturday night dance. Yes, we had dances in grad school. And sometimes it did. But often, the snippets of conversation that surrounded me sounded something like this. My undergraduate honors thesis was entitled Representations of Subalternity and Indigenous Identity in the Films of Jorge Sanjunes and the Prose of Jose Maria Arguedas. By the way, I'm pretty sure I'm not pronouncing those names right, so I just added like a rolling R to make it sound right. Or, bear with me, you mean to say the broadening of alliances by mining non-family into family based in the Enlightenment belief of humanity's benevolence appears so frequently in the era's novel that it can be defined as the genre's defining motif. I didn't quite nail it, but it was something like that, but utterly ridiculous, and so I've been unable to memorize it. If somebody wrote it, I wish they didn't. I'm actually glad they did, because I could use it here. But it was something along those lines. I sat listening, night after night, struck dumb, no pun intended. What classes were these people taking? And why were they able to speak so freely about things for which I would need an encyclopedia to even understand the topic? And then it hit me. They were intellectuals, and I was not. I was filled with admiration and awe and shame. The days passed, still filled with work and some play. I enjoyed my classes and I was doing well. Additionally, I was auditioning for whatever acting opportunities presented themselves, and there were many. But inwardly, I was grieving. The first stage, denial. Of course I'm an intellectual, I told myself. I just haven't found my in yet. It'll come. One night, a conversation of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales presented itself. Who's read the Canterbury Tales? Ooh, Mr. Bramble, not very many. Who's read it in Middle English? What grade were you in?
I think it was in 7th.
7th grade. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so this conversation comes up, and I take my chance, and I blocked out most of the conversation, but it ended in me maniacally reciting the prologue in Middle English, to which somebody replied, "Oh, my 8th graders can do that too." Then came anger. That very night, I raced back to my room, tears of humiliation stinging my eyes. I flung open the door, and there on my desk were all the tools of my undoing. Waiting patiently, unsuspectingly, with one fell swoop of my forearm, I knocked the books and binders to the floor. "Why me?" I said, as I grabbed books from their shelves and I threw them upon the would-be funeral pyre of my intellect. Good news, no matches. I awoke the next morning. I must have collapsed from exhaustion, dry drool and my tears, crinkling the pages. Slowly, lovingly, I picked up each and put it back in its place. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'll treat you better. Just speak to me the way you have to the others. I'll do anything." Bargaining. I wandered out of my dorm in a daze. Found myself in the library, forlornly tracing my finger along the bindings of several of the books I had so recently loved so dearly. At intervals, I barked a guttural lament. Finally, somebody approached me, laid a hand on my shoulder, and with great urgency asked me to leave the library right now. What else was there to feel? The show I was in was opening, and call was in an hour. The show was opening that night. I took a deep breath. I pushed the bedraggled clumps of hair back from my face, and I said to myself, "So you're not an intellectual. So what? There are many things at which you are good. Accept it and move on." An M.Lit student, that's a graduate student at Middlebury, wrote the play I was in. It was thoughtful and well written, and during the performance, the audience was enveloped in that magical state of the suspension of disbelief that every actor works to achieve. When the play ended, there was the slightest pause, and then an explosion of applause. While bowing, I allowed myself to look out into the audience, and it was there I saw it. In the eyes and the mouths and the faces of my friends and peers, I saw it. It was the same look I had when listening to them indulge in their passions, whether it was poetry or education or representations of subalternity and indigenous identity and blah, blah, blah. Mine was theater. And in that moment, everything I was and was not materialized and dissipated. And what was left was enough. More than enough. Don't be afraid of what you're not. You may relinquish a valuable opportunity to discover your inalienable spirit, and the spirit of those who are constantly entering and exiting the stage of your life. By the way, I haven't given up entirely on trying to be an intellectual. I plan to try the crossword puzzle in Monday's times. Thank you.